Jasmine Williams wiped the sweat from her brow as she balanced 3 plates on her left arm. The summer heat had found its way into the restaurant despite the expensive air conditioning system that supposedly kept the place cool. The kitchen doors swung behind her as she stepped into the dining area of the Crystal Room, one of the most upscale restaurants in the city. The dim chandeliers cast a golden glow across the white tablecloths and sparkling silverware. Classical music played softly in the background, just loud enough to fill the silence between conversations but quiet enough to not disturb them. This was where the wealthy came to eat, to be seen, and sometimes to look down on people like her. Table 7 needs more water, her coworker Liz whispered as they passed each other. Jasmine nodded, making a mental note to grab a pitcher after delivering these meals. At 24, Jasmine had been working double shifts at the Crystal Room for almost 3 years. The pay was better than most restaurants, and the tips could be excellent if you served the right customers. That money was her ticket through music school, where she was studying piano performance. Most nights she would return to her small apartment, her fingers aching from carrying trays rather than dancing across piano keys. But she'd still practice for at least an hour before collapsing into bed, often falling asleep to the sound of her metronome still ticking away. Filet mignon, medium rare, Jasmine said with a practiced smile as she set the plate down in front of an older gentleman who barely acknowledged her. Seared scallops with asparagus, she continued, placing the second plate in front of his wife. And the lamb chops with mint sauce. The third plate went to their teenage son, who was too busy on his phone to look up. Will there be anything else I can get for you? Jasmine asked, maintaining her warm tone despite her exhaustion. The man finally looked up. The wine. We ordered wine 10 minutes ago. Of course, sir. The sommelier is bringing your selection personally. He should be here any moment. As if on cue, the wine steward appeared with their bottle of red. Jasmine used this moment to step away and head for the water pitcher. Her feet ached in the black dress, shoes the restaurant required. Practical enough for walking, but nice, enough to match the elegant black pants and crisp white shirt that made up her uniform. She checked her watch. 4 more hours until her shift ended. Then she had to study for her music theory exam tomorrow. Sleep would have to wait. The front doors opened and Jasmine noticed the maitre d' practically jumping to attention. She followed his gaze to a group of 5 people entering, 4 men and 1 woman, all dressed in clothing that probably cost more than her monthly rent. The leader of the group, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and a tailored navy suit that screamed money, didn't wait to be greeted. He simply walked in as if he owned the place, his associates trailing behind him. Mr. Whitfield, what a pleasure to have you joining us tonight, the maitre d' said, bowing slightly. Your usual table is ready. Jasmine had seen Harrison Whitfield in the restaurant before. He was some kind of investment banker or hedge fund manager, one of those jobs where people made millions moving money around without actually creating anything. The staff whispered about him, how he'd left a $100 tip once but reduced a server to tears another time, how he expected perfection and made sure everyone knew he was the most important person in any room. She filled her water pitcher and hoped someone else would be assigned to his table. Jasmine, her manager called quietly, motioning her over. Her heart sank. Table 12 will be yours tonight. She glanced at table 12, Whitfield's table, and nodded. Yes, Mr. Chen. Mr. Chen gave her a sympathetic look. Just be extra careful, okay? He's brought the Thompson Group with him. Big potential clients. The owner just called to make sure everything goes perfectly. I understand, Jasmine said, straightening her shoulders. She needed this job too much to complain. She approached table 12 with her professional smile firmly in place. Good evening and welcome to the Crystal Room. My name is Jasmine and I'll be taking care of you tonight. She began filling their water glasses. Would anyone like to start with a cocktail while you look over the menu? Harrison Whitfield didn't look up from the conversation he was having with the woman beside him. The other men at the table gave Jasmine their drink orders, which she carefully memorized. And for you, sir? She finally asked Whitfield directly. He turned, looking at her as if just realizing she was there. His eyes were a cold blue, assessing her in a single glance. McAllen 25, neat, he said, then immediately turned back to his conversation. Jasmine nodded and turned to leave when one of the men asked about specials. She was in the middle of describing the chef's special salmon dish when she felt someone bump into her from behind. The water pitcher in her hand tilted, spilling water across the white tablecloth and onto Whitfield's sleeve. The table went silent. "I am so sorry." "Sir?" Jasmine said immediately, grabbing napkins to soak up the water. "Let me get that for you. Is it too much to expect competent service?" Whitfield's voice cut through the air like ice. He stood, pulling his arm away from her. "This is a Brioni suit. Do you have any idea what that means?" Jasmine felt her face grow hot. "I'm very sorry, sir. Someone bumped into me. I'll get more napkins right away." "Don't bother," he said, brushing at his sleeve. "Just get someone who can walk properly to serve our table." The others at the table looked uncomfortable. The woman cleared her throat. "Harrison, is just water. It'll dry." Whitfield ignored her, his eyes still fixed on Jasmine. "What's wrong with your hands?" Jasmine blinked, confused. "Excuse me?" He pointed to her fingers. "Your hands." "The calluses. Not very fitting for someone serving food, is it?" She instinctively curled her fingers inward. Years of playing the piano had indeed given her calluses on her fingertips, badges of honor in music school, but apparently something to be mocked here. "I play piano," she said quietly. Not sure why she was even explaining herself. This seemed to amuse him. His mouth curved into something between a smirk and a smile. "You play piano," he repeated. "At what, some dive bar on weekends?" He chuckled, glancing at his companions to join in. A few gave uncomfortable smiles. The woman didn't. "I'm a student at the City Conservatory," Jasmine said, her voice stronger than she expected. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I'll get your drinks." She turned and walked away before he could say anything else, her back straight despite wanting to disappear. In the service area, she took a deep breath, trying to calm the anger and humiliation burning in her chest. "You okay?" Liz asked, noticing her expression. "Mr. Whitfield spilled water on himself when someone bumped into me," Jasmine explained. "Then he decided to make fun of my hands." Liz rolled her eyes. "That man is the worst. Last month he sent his steak back 3 times. Then complained to Mr. Chen that I was incompetent. He asked about my calluses. Then laughed when I said I play piano," Jasmine said, starting to prepare the drinks for the table. Her hands were shaking slightly. "Don't let him get to you," Liz said, squeezing her arm. "Men like that only feel big when they're making others feel small." Jasmine nodded, but the encounter had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. Music wasn't just something she did, it was who she was. Even on days when her fingers were too tired to practice properly, she'd listen to recordings, studying the nuances of different pianists interpreting the same piece. She'd fallen in love with the piano at age 7, when her grandmother had taken her to a community concert. By 9, she was taking lessons on a second-hand upright piano that her grandmother had saved for months to buy. Now, she was in her final year at the conservatory, working toward a future where she might earn a living doing what she loved. Having someone dismiss that dream so casually felt like a slap in the face. She returned to table 12 with their drinks, setting them down carefully. The conversation paused as she arrived, making her wonder if they'd been talking about her. "Are you ready to order, or would you like a few more minutes with the menus?" she asked, her professional mask back in place. They ordered, Whitfield barely acknowledging her presence this time. As she collected the menus, the woman, who had introduced herself as Vanessa Thompson during the ordering, caught her eye. "I apologize for earlier," she said quietly. "It's not necessary, ma'am," Jasmine replied with a small smile. "But thank you." As she walked away, she heard Whitfield say something that made the table laugh, and she wondered if it was at her expense again. But she had other tables to serve, other customers who treated her like a human being rather than an object of ridicule. The rest of her shift was busy enough to keep her mind off the encounter. Whitfield's table ordered expensive wines and multiple courses, running up a bill that would probably cover a month of Jasmine's rent. When it came time for dessert, she approached their table again, notepad ready. "Would anyone care for dessert this evening?" she asked. "Our chocolate soufflé is particularly good tonight." To her surprise, Whitfield looked directly at her this time, that same amused expression on his face. "Tell me, Jasmine the pianist," he said, "what do you play?" "Chopsticks. Heart and soul?" His companions looked uncomfortable again, but he didn't seem to notice or care. Jasmine kept her expression neutral. "Chopin, Liszt, Rachmaninoff. Currently, I'm working on Prokofiev's 3rd piano concerto for my senior recital." She didn't know why she told him all that, maybe just to see the surprise on his face. He raised an eyebrow. Ambitious, he said, in a tone that suggested he didn't believe her. We'll skip dessert. Just the check. Of course. She placed the leather folder with their bill on the table and stepped back. Thank you for dining with us tonight. As she walked away, she heard him say, Prokofiev, right, followed by a chuckle. Her hands curled into fists, but she kept walking. His opinion didn't matter. The only opinions that mattered were those of her professors, her future audiences, and most importantly, her own. Later that night, after counting her tips and changing out of her uniform, Jasmine left through the restaurant's back door. Her body ached from the long shift, but her mind was already on the practice room she'd booked for tomorrow morning before class. As she waited at the bus stop, she pulled out her worn copy of the Prokofiev score from her bag, silently working through a tricky passage with her fingers in the air. The encounter with Harrison Whitfield was already fading from her mind. Just another unpleasant interaction in a job filled with both kind and difficult people. What she didn't know was that their paths would cross again, and that the next encounter would change both their lives in ways neither could imagine. A week had passed since the incident with Harrison Whitfield, and Jasmine had almost forgotten about it. Almost. His mocking tone still echoed in her mind during quiet moments, but she had pushed it aside, focusing instead on her upcoming theory exam and the Prokofiev piece that still gave her trouble in the third movement. The Crystal Room was unusually busy for a Thursday night. A tech company was celebrating some kind of merger in the private dining area. A family was hosting an anniversary dinner in the corner, and the regular tables were filled with the usual wealthy clientele. Jasmine moved efficiently between her assigned tables, her feet already aching 3 hours into her shift. Heads up, Liz whispered as they passed each other near the kitchen. Your favorite customer is back. Jasmine turned to see Harrison Whitfield entering the restaurant, and her heart sank. This time, he had a much larger group with him, at least 10 people, all in business attire, looking like they had just left a successful meeting. They were laughing, speaking loudly, clearly in a celebratory mood. Please don't put them at my tables, Jasmine muttered under her breath, but luck wasn't on her side. The maitre seated the large group right in her section, pushing together several tables to accommodate them. Mr. Chen appeared beside her almost immediately. Jasmine, Mr. Whitfield has requested their regular server, he said, looking apologetic. Me? Jasmine asked, surprised. After their last encounter, she would have expected him to demand anyone but her. Mr. Chen nodded. I can ask Thomas to take over if you'd prefer. She considered it for a moment. Thomas could use the tips, but she also needed the money, especially with her piano strings needing replacement soon. Besides, she wasn't going to let someone like Whitfield chase her away from doing her job. It's fine, she said. I'll take care of them. Mr. Chen looked relieved. Thank you. The owner just called. Apparently Mr. Whitfield is celebrating a huge deal tonight. The guests with him represent a major client for his firm. Jasmine nodded and took a deep breath before approaching the table. She could feel Whitfield watching her as she neared. Good evening, everyone, she said with her professional smile. Welcome to the Crystal Room. My name is Jasmine, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. Jasmine, Whitfield exclaimed, his voice carrying across the restaurant. Everyone, this is the pianist I told you about. Jasmine froze, water pitcher in hand. The entire table turned to look at her. I'm sorry, she said, her smile faltering slightly. Our waitress fancies herself a concert pianist, Whitfield said to his companions, his tone amused. Plays Prokofiev, apparently. A woman at the table looked impressed. Really? That's wonderful. Jasmine nodded awkwardly. I'm a student at the conservatory. Would you like to hear about tonight's specials? Not yet, Whitfield said, waving his hand dismissively. First, drinks to celebrate. Champagne for the table. The Krug Grande Cuvée. And bring me a Macallan 25 neat. Of course, Jasmine said, relieved to have a reason to walk away from the table. As she headed toward the bar, she could feel her cheeks burning. Why had he remembered that detail about her? And why bring it up to humiliate her again? The next hour passed in a blur of drink orders, appetizers, and main courses. The group was celebrating a major client signing, something that would apparently bring millions to their firm. They were in high spirits, getting louder as the alcohol flowed. Whitfield was at the center of it all, telling stories that made everyone laugh, ordering more bottles of expensive wine, clearly showing off his success and wealth. Jasmine managed to avoid any further personal comments until she was clearing their dinner plates. "So, Jasmine the pianist," Whitfield said suddenly, causing conversations around the table to pause. "Tell us more about your music." She hesitated, plates balanced carefully in her arms. "There's not much to tell, sir. I study piano performance and I work here to pay for school." "What a wonderful story," he said, his smile not reaching his eyes. The struggling artist waiting tables to pursue her dream. One of the men at the table, a bit kinder looking than Whitfield, asked, "What piece are you working on now?" "Prokofiev's Third Piano Concerto," she answered, grateful for the genuine interest. "It's challenging but beautiful." "Impressive," the man said, nodding appreciatively. Whitfield's expression changed slightly, as if he hadn't expected someone in his party to engage with her seriously. "You know," he said, tapping his glass with a fork to get everyone's attention, "we should have some entertainment with our dessert. The Crystal Room has that lovely grand piano over there. Why don't you play something for us, Jasmine?" The table went silent. Jasmine stared at him, not sure if she had heard correctly. "Excuse me?" "Play for us," Whitfield repeated, gesturing toward the baby grand piano that sat on a small raised platform in the corner of the restaurant. "Show us this talent of yours." The piano was reserved for the professional pianist who came in on Friday and Saturday nights. No server had ever played it. I'm working, sir," Jasmine said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I have other tables to attend to." "Oh, I'm sure your manager would allow it. Isn't that right?" Whitfield turned to look for Mr. Chen, who had been hovering nearby, monitoring the important table. Mr. Chen stepped forward, looking uncomfortable. "Mr. Whitfield, while we appreciate your patronage, our staff members have specific duties and we've spent over $2,000 here tonight, with more to come," Whitfield interrupted. "Surely a small musical interlude from your talented waitress isn't too much to ask." "I'd consider it part of the evening's entertainment." Jasmine watched Mr. Chen's face as he calculated the cost of refusing Whitfield versus the disruption to the restaurant. "Money won. Of course, Mr. Whitfield," Mr. Chen said with a tight smile. He turned to Jasmine. "Just a short piece would be fine, Jasmine. Thomas can cover your tables for a few minutes." Jasmine felt trapped. She couldn't refuse without risking her job, but she knew Whitfield was only doing this to embarrass her. He expected her to fail, to prove she had been exaggerating about her musical abilities. Looking around the table, she saw a mix of expressions. Some looked uncomfortable with the situation, others seemed curious, and a few mirrored Whitfield's smug anticipation of her humiliation. "Just one short piece," Mr. Chen added in a quieter voice, clearly trying to make the best of a bad situation. Jasmine nodded slowly. "I'll need to wash my hands first." "Of course," Mr. Chen said, relief evident in his voice that she was cooperating. In the kitchen, Jasmine quickly rinsed her hands, trying to calm her racing heart. Thomas patted her shoulder supportively. "What are you going to play?" he asked. "I don't know," she admitted. "Something that won't take too long." Her mind raced through her repertoire. The Prokofiev was too long and required an orchestra. A Chopin nocturne? Too delicate for this environment. A Bach prelude? Too academic. She dried her hands and took a deep breath. This wasn't how she had imagined her first public performance at a venue like the Crystal Room, but she wasn't going to let Whitfield win by playing poorly or choosing something easy. When she returned to the dining room, she noticed that word had spread. Diners at other tables were watching curiously as she made her way to the piano. The restaurant had grown quieter, conversations hushed as people wondered what was happening. The baby grand was a beautiful instrument, a Steinway that probably cost more than she would make in 10 years. She sat on the bench, adjusting it slightly, and took another deep breath. Her hands were trembling, not from fear of playing, but from anger at being put in this position. She glanced over at Whitfield's table. He was watching her with that same amused expression, wineglass in hand, clearly expecting to be entertained, not by good music, but by her failure. The thought strengthened her resolve. Jasmine placed her hands on the keys, feeling the familiar cool ivory beneath her fingers. She closed her eyes for a moment, centering herself. Then she began to play. She chose Rachmaninoff's Prelude in G minor. It was dramatic, technically challenging, and short enough to not disrupt the restaurant for too long. The opening chords resonated through the room. instantly silencing what little conversation remained. At first, she was acutely aware of her audience, the other diners, her co-workers, and especially Whitfield and his party. But as she continued to play, the world around her faded away as it always did when she lost herself in music. Her fingers flew across the keys with precision and passion, drawing out the piece's emotional complexity, from its thundering bass notes to its delicate melodic runs. The restaurant's excellent acoustics carried the sound perfectly, filling the space with Rachmaninoff's intense harmonies. Jasmine forgot she was wearing a server's uniform instead of a concert dress. She forgot about her aching feet and the humiliation that had led to this moment. There was only the music, flowing from her heart through her hands to the keys. When she played the final chord, letting it resonate before lifting her hands, the restaurant remained silent for a beat. Then applause erupted, not just from nearby tables, but from throughout the dining room. Jasmine opened her eyes, momentarily disoriented by the enthusiastic response. She stood and gave a small, awkward bow, unused to receiving applause in this setting. As she turned to return to her duties, she caught sight of Whitfield's table. The expressions there ranged from stunned to impressed. Several people were on their feet applauding. The kind man who had asked about her music was smiling broadly, nodding in appreciation. And Harrison Whitfield sat motionless, his face unreadable, the smug smile gone. For a brief moment their eyes met across the room, and Jasmine lifted her chin slightly, a small gesture of defiance. Mr. Chen approached her, beaming. "That was wonderful, Jasmine. I had no idea you played so beautifully." She smiled, still feeling the adrenaline of the performance. "Thank you. I should get back to my tables now." "Actually," he said, lowering his voice, "Mr. Fontaine, the owner, just called. He was watching on the security cameras. He wants you to take a short break before returning to service." He pressed a glass of water into her hand. "And several guests have asked if you'll be playing again." Jasmine blinked in surprise. "Playing again? We'll discuss it later," Mr. Chen said with a wink. "For now, catch your breath. Thomas has things under control." As she sipped her water, Jasmine noticed several diners smiling at her or raising their glasses in her direction. The atmosphere in the restaurant had changed. There was a buzz of conversation, people discussing what they had just witnessed. A few were even taking photos of the piano, as if to remember where they had been when they heard her play. She knew she would have to return to Whitfield's table soon to take their dessert orders. The thought no longer filled her with dread. Something had shifted, not just in how others saw her, but in how she saw herself in this space. For the first time since she had started working at the Crystal Room, she felt truly seen, not just as a server, but as the musician she was working so hard to become. And as for Harrison Whitfield, let him think what he wanted. His attempt to mock her had backfired spectacularly, and they both knew it. The night was far from over, but Jasmine had already won. When Jasmine returned to Whitfield's table, something had shifted. The dynamic was different. The way they looked at her had changed. No longer just a server, she was now someone who had revealed unexpected depths. A few of the guests smiled warmly at her. One woman even asked where she studied. Harrison Whitfield, however, remained oddly quiet. He watched her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not quite anger, not quite respect, but a strange mixture of both, with something else underneath. "Would anyone care for dessert this evening?" Jasmine asked, her voice steadier than she had expected. Several people ordered various desserts, while others requested coffee or after-dinner drinks. When it came to Whitfield's turn, he simply said, "Just coffee, black." As Jasmine turned to leave, a gray-haired woman at the table, the same one who had asked about her studies, touched her arm gently. "That was extraordinary, dear," she said. "Rachmaninoff is not easy, and you played beautifully." "Thank you," Jasmine replied, genuinely touched by the compliment. "I don't think we've been properly introduced," the woman continued. "I'm Eleanor Vaughn. I sit on the board of the City Symphony." Jasmine's eyes widened slightly. The City Symphony was one of the most prestigious orchestras in the region. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Vaughn." "The pleasure is mine," Eleanor smiled. "When you have a moment, I'd like to speak with you about something." "Of course," Jasmine nodded, trying to keep her professional demeanor despite the excitement bubbling inside her. She hurried to the kitchen to place the dessert orders, her mind racing. A board member of the City Symphony wanted to talk to her. Thomas caught her eye as she entered the kitchen. "You're all anyone's talking about," he said with a grin. "Mr. Chen said 3 different tables asked if you were the regular entertainment." Jasmine laughed, feeling lighter than she had in months. "I think that would defeat the purpose of my being a server." "Maybe, maybe not," Thomas replied mysteriously, bustling past her with a tray of drinks. When Jasmine returned to Whitfield's table with their desserts and coffee, the conversation paused briefly. She felt eyes on her as she placed each item in front of its recipient, with practiced grace. When she reached Whitfield, he finally spoke directly to her. "That was unexpected," he said, his tone controlled but not unkind. "Thank you, sir," Jasmine replied neutrally, placing his coffee in front of him. "Where did you learn to play like that?" The question seemed genuine, without the mocking edge his words had carried before. "I started with my grandmother when I was 7, Jasmine answered. "She was my first teacher. Then I had various instructors through school, and now at the conservatory." He nodded slowly as if processing this information. "You're very talented." The compliment caught her off guard. "Thank you," she said again, not knowing what else to add. "Ms. Williams," Eleanor Vaughn called from across the table, "when you're finished with your duties, please do stop by." "I meant what I said about speaking with you." "Yes, ma'am," Jasmine replied. "I'll be back to check on you shortly." As the evening progressed, Jasmine felt as if she were moving through a dream. Other diners stopped her to compliment her playing. One woman asked if she gave private lessons. A young girl dining with her parents shyly requested an autograph on a napkin. Even Mr. Chen seemed to view her differently, treating her with a new respect. When Whitfield's table had finished their desserts and paid their substantial bill, Eleanor Vaughn waved Jasmine over. "Do you have a card, dear?" she asked. "No, ma'am, I don't," Jasmine admitted, "but I can write down my contact information." "Please do," Eleanor said, handing her a small leather-bound notebook from her purse. The Symphony Foundation offers several scholarships and performance opportunities for promising young musicians. "I'd like you to audition for our Young Artist program next month." Jasmine's hand froze mid-writing. "The Young Artist program? But that's for the best students in the country." "And based on what I heard tonight, that includes you," Eleanor said firmly. "The application deadline is in 2 weeks. I'll send you the details." "Thank you," Jasmine said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This means more than you know." "Talent deserves recognition," Eleanor replied simply. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Jasmine, even under these unusual circumstances." Her eyes flickered briefly toward Whitfield, who was signing the credit card receipt. As the group prepared to leave, Jasmine noticed that several people from the table gave her unusually generous tips, discreetly handed to her with warm smiles. Harrison Whitfield was the last to leave. He paused beside her, seeming to struggle with what to say. "I misjudged you," he finally said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "That doesn't happen often." Before she could respond, he walked away, joining his associates who were waiting by the door. Jasmine watched them leave, still trying to process everything that had happened. The rest of her shift passed in a blur. When she finally hung up her apron at the end of the night, Mr. Chen called her into his office. "Jasmine, Mr. Fontaine was very impressed with your playing tonight," he said, referring to the restaurant's owner. "He'd like to offer you a position as our weekend pianist." She blinked in surprise. "Sir? Friday and Saturday evenings, 3 hours each night. You'd be paid the standard musician's rate, which is—" He named a figure that made her eyes widen. It was more than she made in a week of serving. "Of course, you could continue your regular shifts as well if you wish." "I don't know what to say," Jasmine admitted. "Say yes." Mr. Chen smiled. "You lit up the restaurant tonight. Several regular customers have already called to ask if you'll be playing again." "Then yes," she said, a smile spreading across her face. "Absolutely yes. Excellent. We'll work out the details tomorrow. For now, get some rest. You've had quite a night." Outside the restaurant, the cool night air felt refreshing after the warmth of the kitchen and dining room. Jasmine checked her watch, too late for the bus. She'd have to splurge on a ride home. As she waited for her car to arrive, she scrolled through her phone messages. There were several from her roommate, Katie. "Call me. Someone just sent me a video of you playing piano in your work clothes." Confused, Jasmine dialed Katie's number. Her roommate picked up immediately. "Oh my God, Jess, you're all over social media." "What are you talking about?" Jasmine asked. Someone recorded you playing tonight and posted it online. It's already got thousands of views. People are asking who you are and where they can hear you play. Jasmine felt a wave of disbelief. That's crazy, I know. Listen, you need to make this work for you. Set up a proper social media page like yesterday. This could be huge for your career. The ride home was a daze as Jasmine tried to wrap her head around everything. First the performance itself, then Eleanor Vaughn's offer, the piano position at the restaurant, and now this. A viral video? It was too much to process. In her tiny apartment, Katie was waiting up for her, practically bouncing with excitement. She thrust her laptop at Jasmine the moment she walked in the door. Look, the video was indeed of her, playing Rachmaninoff at the restaurant's piano, still in her server's uniform. The quality wasn't great. It had clearly been shot on someone's phone from across the room. But the sound came through well enough. The caption read, "Server forced to play piano by rude customer. Watch what happens." The comment section was filled with surprised reactions and compliments. Holy cow, she's amazing. Does she have an album? I want to hear more. That rich dude's face when she started playing. This is like a movie scene in real life. There were also questions about who she was, where she performed, and if she had music available anywhere. See? Katie said excitedly. This is your moment. We need to capitalize on it. Jasmine sat down heavily on their worn couch, suddenly feeling the exhaustion of the long day. I don't even know where to begin. Well, for starters, I set up an account for you, Katie admitted. I hope you don't mind. I used some of those videos from your practice sessions at school, and I linked to the conservatory page where you're listed as a student. Katie, Jasmine exclaimed, not sure whether to be grateful or horrified. What? Someone was going to figure out who you are anyway. This way you control the narrative. Katie sat beside her. Think about it, this could help with bookings, maybe even recording opportunities. Your senior recital could sell out. The idea of a packed concert hall for her final performance was appealing, Jasmine had to admit. Usually student recitals were attended only by family, friends, and professors who were required to be there. And there's more, Katie continued, scrolling through comments. Look at this one. It was from someone claiming to be an assistant to a music director at a major streaming platform, asking if Jasmine would be interested in being featured in a documentary series about undiscovered musical talents. That could be anyone, Jasmine said skeptically. Probably just a scam. Maybe, Katie conceded. But maybe not. The point is, doors are opening, Jazz, all because that awful man tried to embarrass you. Jasmine thought about Harrison Whitfield's face as she'd played, the shock, the disbelief, and finally, something that looked almost like respect. His parting words echoed in her mind. I misjudged you. That doesn't happen often. She had gone to work today as a waitress, struggling to make ends meet while pursuing her dream. She was ending the day with a weekend position as a pianist, an invitation to audition for a prestigious program, a viral video, and possibilities she hadn't even imagined when she woke up this morning. I should probably practice, she said, half joking. Katie laughed. It's 1 a.m. Even the neighbors would object. You're right. Jasmine smiled, finally allowing herself to feel the full weight of the evening's events, the fear, the triumph, the unexpected opportunities. I still can't believe any of this is happening. Believe it, Katie said, squeezing her hand. This is just the beginning. As Jasmine finally lay down to sleep that night, her mind kept returning to the moment her fingers first touched the keys of that beautiful Steinway. The sensation of power, of being truly in her element despite the circumstances. The look on Whitfield's face when he realized his attempt to humiliate her had backfired completely. She fell asleep with a small smile on her face, dreaming of music, of applause, and of possibilities that suddenly seemed within reach. 3 weeks after that fateful night at the Crystal Room, Jasmine's life had changed in ways she never could have imagined. Her weekends were now spent at the restaurant's piano instead of carrying trays. Though she kept some of her weekday serving shifts to maintain a steady income, her professors at the conservatory had seen the video. It had spread through the music department like wildfire, and suddenly, they were paying more attention to her progress, offering extra help and encouragement. Today, she sat in the waiting area outside the City Symphony Hall's rehearsal rooms, nervously smoothing the wrinkles from her best dress. The Young Artists Program audition was in 15 minutes, and despite having practiced until her fingers ached, She still felt unprepared. "Ms. Williams?" A young man with a clipboard appeared in the doorway. "They're ready for you now." Jasmine took a deep breath, picked up her folder of sheet music and followed him down a long hallway lined with photos of past symphony performances. The rehearsal room was larger than she expected. A grand space with high ceilings and a magnificent Steinway concert grand piano at its center. What made her stomach drop, however, was the panel of judges sitting at a long table facing the piano. She recognized Eleanor Vaughn immediately, but the other four faces were unfamiliar, including a stern-looking older man in the center who she guessed was the symphony's conductor. "Jasmine Williams?" he asked, peering at her over reading glasses. "Yes, sir," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm Robert Harlow, conductor of the City Symphony. These are my colleagues." He introduced the other judges, but their names blurred together in Jasmine's nervousness. "Eleanor has spoken highly of your abilities. Let's see if you live up to the praise." Eleanor gave her an encouraging smile, but said nothing. "I've prepared Prokofiev's third piano concerto. First movement," Jasmine said, setting her music on the piano. "Ambitious," Robert commented. The same word Harrison Whitfield had used, but without the condescension. "When you're ready." Jasmine sat at the piano, adjusting the bench height. She placed her hands on the keys, took a breath to center herself, and began to play. The music room's acoustics were perfect, far better than the restaurant's. Each note rang out crystal clear as she navigated the complex rhythms and harmonies of Prokofiev's challenging composition. Though her hands moved confidently across the keys, her mind was racing. Was she playing too fast? Was her interpretation too conservative? Was she making mistakes she couldn't hear? 20 minutes later, she played the final notes of the movement and lifted her hands from the keys. The room was silent for a moment. "Thank you, Ms. Williams," Robert said, his expression unreadable. "We'd also like to hear something in a different style. Do you have another piece prepared?" "Yes," Jasmine nodded. "Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. Perfect. Please proceed." She turned to a different piece of music and began the lyrical, dreamy nocturne, so different from the angular modernism of Prokofiev. Here she felt more confident, letting the melodies flow naturally, adding subtle expressiveness without overplaying. The piece had been her grandmother's favorite, and she always felt a special connection when performing it. When she finished, she noticed that Eleanor was smiling broadly. "Very nice," Robert said, making a note on his paper. "Finally, we'd like you to sight read something." He gestured to an assistant who brought over a piece of sheet music and placed it on the piano. Jasmine glanced at the title. Debussy's Reflets dans l'eau from Images, Book 1. She had heard the piece before but never played it. The complex impressionistic harmonies and fluid rhythms would be challenging to sight read. "Take a moment to look it over," Robert instructed, "then play as much as you can." Jasmine studied the music for a minute, mentally mapping out the tricky passages before placing her hands on the keys once more. She began tentatively, focusing on capturing the flowing, water-like quality of the piece rather than hitting every note perfectly. There were stumbles and hesitations, but she pushed through, trying to maintain the musical line even when her fingers couldn't quite keep up with what her eyes were seeing. After she finished, the judges conferred quietly among themselves. Eleanor seemed to be arguing for something, while Robert looked skeptical. Finally, they turned back to her. "Ms. Williams, your technical ability is impressive," Robert began, "but the Young Artist program is extremely competitive. We typically accept students who have been preparing for major competitions since childhood." Jasmine's heart sank, but she kept her expression neutral. "However," he continued, "there's something refreshing about your playing. It lacks some of the polishing we typically see, but there's an emotional honesty that can't be taught." He glanced at Eleanor, who nodded encouragingly. "We'd like to offer you a conditional acceptance to the program." "Conditional?" Jasmine asked, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "Yes, you would need to commit to additional technical training, at least 3 extra sessions per week with one of our staff pianists. Your course load at the conservatory would need to be adjusted to accommodate this, and you would be expected to perform in the student showcase at the end of the semester." "I understand," Jasmine said, trying to keep her voice steady. "And I accept. Thank you for this opportunity." "Don't thank us yet," Robert said with a hint of a smile. "The work is just beginning." As she left the symphony hall, stepping into the bright afternoon sunlight, Jasmine felt as if she were floating. She pulled out her phone to call Katie with the news, only to find several missed calls and texts from her roommate. "Call me ASAP. You won't believe what happened." Concerned, Jasmine dialed Katie's number immediately. "Jazz, where have you been? I've been trying to reach you all morning." Katie's voice was excited rather than worried. "I had my audition for the Young Artist program. What's going on?" "The video got picked up by National Morning Show. They want to interview you tomorrow." "What?" Jasmine stopped walking, causing someone behind her to bump into her. "Sorry," she mumbled to the stranger before returning to her call. "Are you serious?" "Completely serious. They called the conservatory looking for you, and the administration gave them my number since I'm your emergency contact. It's their Inspiring America segment. They want to do a remote interview from their local affiliate station." "This is crazy," Jasmine said, resuming her walk toward the bus stop. "What would I even say?" "Just tell your story." The talented musician working as a waitress, the rude rich guy trying to humiliate you, the amazing performance that changed everything. People love that kind of thing. Jasmine wasn't so sure. The spotlight was moving very fast, and while she was grateful for the opportunities coming her way, she also felt overwhelmed. "I'll think about it." "What's there to think about? This is national TV. Do you know how many pianists would kill for that kind of exposure?" I know. Let me just process everything. I just got conditionally accepted to the Young Artist program, and now this. You got in? That's amazing." Katie's excitement was infectious, and despite her reservations about the interview, Jasmine found herself smiling. "We're celebrating tonight, no arguments." That evening, as promised, Katie took Jasmine out to a small jazz club downtown. They couldn't afford anything fancy, but the live music and relaxed atmosphere were exactly what Jasmine needed. They were sipping their drinks when Katie suddenly grabbed her arm. "Don't look now, but Harrison Whitfield just walked in." Despite the warning, Jasmine turned to look. Sure enough, Harrison Whitfield was at the entrance speaking to the host. He was dressed more casually than she had seen him before. Dark jeans and a button-down shirt rather than his usual suit. But it was definitely him. "And he was alone. What should we do?" Katie whispered. "Nothing," Jasmine replied, turning back to her drink. "It's a public place. He probably doesn't even remember me." But a few minutes later, as the band took a break, a shadow fell across their table. "Ms. Williams," Whitfield said, his voice lacking its usual arrogance. "I thought that was you." Jasmine looked up, meeting his gaze directly. "Mr. Whitfield." "I don't mean to interrupt your evening," he said, seeming almost uncomfortable. "I just wanted to say that I've been following your story since that night at the restaurant." Katie kicked Jasmine under the table, her eyes wide with disbelief. "My story?" Jasmine asked. "The video, the job at the Crystal Room, and I hear there's interest from the symphony." He shifted his weight slightly. "I wanted to apologize for my behavior that night. It was inexcusable." The apology caught her off guard. "Thank you," she said simply, not sure what else to add. "I also wanted to give you this." He handed her a business card. "I have connections with several arts foundations. If you're interested in additional support for your studies or performances, please reach out." Jasmine took the card, surprised by the gesture. "Why would you want to help me?" Whitfield was silent for a moment. "Let's just say I'm trying to make amends for past behavior." He glanced at the stage where the musicians were returning for their next set. "You have extraordinary talent, Ms. Williams. It would be a shame to see it limited by financial constraints." Before she could respond, he nodded politely to both women and walked away, finding a seat at the bar. "Did that just happen?" Katie asked, wide-eyed. "The guy who tried to humiliate you is now offering to be your patron." Jasmine looked down at the card in her hand. It was heavy, expensive cardstock with Whitfield's name and contact information, embossed in simple black lettering. "I don't know what to make of it." "Me neither," Katie admitted. "But it seems sincere, and connections like his could open a lot of doors." The band started playing again, a slow, thoughtful jazz standard that seemed to match Jasmine's mood. She tucked the card into her purse, not ready to decide what to do about it yet. "One thing at a time," she said. "First the Young Artist program, then maybe the TV interview. I'll think about Whitfield's offer later." "Fair enough," Katie agreed, lifting her glass. "To your amazing new life." "To unexpected changes," Jasmine countered, clinking her glass against her friend's. As they listened to the music, Jasmine found herself occasionally glancing toward the bar where Whitfield sat alone, nursing a drink and listening to the band with apparent appreciation. The man who had tried to use her love of music to humiliate her was now offering to help advance her career. Life had taken a very strange turn indeed. The next morning, Jasmine woke to more messages, not just from Katie and friends who had seen the viral video, but from local newspapers wanting interviews, and even an inquiry from a small record label specializing in classical music. The world that had seemed so closed to her just weeks ago was suddenly wide open, full of possibilities she had only dreamed about. As she got ready for her first day of training with the symphony staff pianist, Jasmine thought about how quickly life could change. One moment of attempted humiliation had transformed into a catalyst for opportunities she never could have imagined. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she wondered what would happen when she finally called the number on Harrison Whitfield's card. 6 months had passed since the night Jasmine played at the Crystal Room. Winter had given way to spring, and spring had bloomed into a warm summer filled with more changes than she could have imagined. The TV interview had led to others, each one widening her audience. Her weekend performances at the restaurant now drew crowds who came specifically to hear her play, leaving generous tips that helped her cut back on serving shifts to focus more on her music. The Young Artists program had transformed her playing. Under the guidance of Anton Petrov, the symphony's stern but brilliant staff pianist, Jasmine had refined her technique while maintaining the emotional honesty that had caught the judge's attention. Her hands moved differently now, more efficiently with greater control and precision. And though the additional training had been grueling, the results were undeniable. Today she stood backstage at Hillman Concert Hall, peeking through the curtains at the packed auditorium. The Young Artist Showcase was the culmination of the program, featuring 10 exceptional musicians selected from hundreds of applicants. Each would perform one piece with the full City Symphony backing them, an honor typically reserved for established soloists. Nervous? A voice asked behind her. Jasmine turned to see Anton, dressed in his customary all-black outfit, his silver hair swept back from his forehead. Terrified, she admitted with a small smile. Good, he nodded. The day you stop feeling nervous before a performance is the day you stop caring about music. She smoothed the front of her new concert dress, a deep purple gown that Katie had helped her pick out. It was the first proper performance dress she'd ever owned, paid for with her earnings from the Crystal Room. Remember, Anton said, placing a hand on her shoulder. The Prokofiev is a conversation between you and the orchestra. Listen as much as you play. Jasmine nodded, taking a deep breath. Anton had been drilling this into her for months, that even as a soloist she was part of something larger, not simply performing on top of orchestral accompaniment. You've done the work, he continued. Now trust yourself and enjoy the moment. The stage manager appeared with her clipboard. Ms. Williams, you're on in 5 minutes. As Anton walked away to find his seat in the audience, Jasmine closed her eyes and mentally reviewed the Prokofiev concerto one more time. She had performed the first movement at her audition, but tonight she would play all 3 movements, nearly 30 minutes of some of the most technically demanding piano music ever written. The stage lights dimmed, signaling the end of intermission. The audience's chatter faded as the orchestra members returned to their seats. Jasmine watched as Robert Harlow, the conductor, strode onto the stage to applause, shaking hands with the concertmaster before turning to face the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, our next performer this evening is a remarkable young talent who came to our attention in a rather unconventional way. A murmur of recognition passed through the audience. Many knew her story by now. She will be performing Prokofiev's Piano Concerto No. 3 in C major. Please welcome Jasmine Williams. Heart-pounding, Jasmine walked onto the stage, the spotlight following her to the gleaming concert grand piano at its center. The applause was warm and encouraging as she took her position, adjusting the bench and nodding to the conductor. As the orchestra began the quiet clarinet solo that opens the concerto, she took one last steadying breath and placed her hands on the keys. When her entrance came, all nervousness fell away. There was only the music, complex, thrilling, demanding her complete focus. The first movement unfolded with its mix of lyricism and percussive energy, her fingers finding each note with precision, born of countless hours of practice. She could feel the orchestra responding to her playing, Robert adjusting the tempo slightly to match her interpretation. It truly was a conversation as Anton had taught her. During a brief orchestral section, Jasmine glanced out at the audience, most of their faces hidden in darkness beyond the stage lights. In the third row, she caught a glimpse of a familiar profile, Harrison Whitfield. She hadn't spoken to him since that night at the jazz club, though she had seen him occasionally at her Crystal Room performances, always sitting quietly at a corner table, never approaching her afterward. She had debated for weeks about whether to call the number on his business card before finally reaching out. To her surprise, he had connected her not with arts foundations, as he'd suggested, but with something more valuable, a piano. A Yamaha Baby Grand had been delivered to her apartment, requiring some creative rearrangement of furniture, with a simple note. For your practice, no strings attached. The gift had transformed her ability to prepare for tonight. Instead of squeezing in practice time at the conservatory's crowded facilities, she could work at home at any hour, for as long as she needed. She had written a thank you note but received no response. As the first movement ended to enthusiastic applause, Jasmine caught her breath, preparing for the dreamlike second movement. This was where she had struggled most in rehearsals, finding the balance between the movement's introspective moments and its sudden bursts of intensity. Tonight, however, everything seemed to flow naturally, her hands moving with a confidence that surprised even her. By the time she reached the fiendishly difficult third movement, with its driving rhythms and virtuosic piano writing, she was completely immersed in the performance. The countless hours of practice, the guidance from Anton, the opportunity from Eleanor Vaughn, everything had led to this moment. Her fingers flew across the keyboard in the final pages of the concerto, building to the triumphant conclusion. When the last chord rang out and her hands lifted from the keys, there was a moment of silence before the audience erupted in applause. People rose to their feet, a standing ovation that brought tears to Jasmine's eyes. She stood, bowing first to the audience, then to the orchestra, and finally shaking hands with Robert, who was beaming with approval. As she took her final bow and left the stage, she felt a sense of accomplishment, unlike anything she had experienced before. This wasn't just about proving something to Harrison Whitfield or anyone else who had underestimated her. This was about proving something to herself, that her grandmother's faith in her talent, all those years of sacrifice and hard work, had been worthwhile. Backstage, Eleanor Vaughn was waiting with a bouquet of flowers. "Extraordinary," she said, embracing Jasmine. "You've come so far in such a short time." "Thank you for giving me the chance," Jasmine replied, still breathless from the performance. "Talent like yours only needs a door opened," Eleanor said. "You walked through it on your own merit." After changing out of her concert dress, Jasmine made her way to the reception area where performers mingled with donors and symphony supporters. Katie rushed over immediately, throwing her arms around her. "You were incredible. I don't know anything about classical music, but even I could tell you were killing it up there." Jasmine laughed, grateful for her friend's unwavering support through all the changes of the past months. As they chatted, she noticed Harrison Whitfield standing near the refreshment table, speaking with Eleanor Vaughn. Their conversation seemed serious, with Eleanor nodding as Whitfield spoke. "Should we go say hello?" Katie asked, following her gaze. Before Jasmine could answer, the pair concluded their conversation and Whitfield walked over to them. "Ms. Williams," he said with a slight nod. "Congratulations on your performance. It was exceptional." "Thank you," Jasmine replied. "And thank you for the piano. It made a tremendous difference in my preparation." "I'm glad." He seemed different from the arrogant man who had tried to humiliate her at the Crystal Room, more subdued, more thoughtful. "Mrs. Vaughn tells me you're graduating from the conservatory next month." "Yes, with distinction," she said, still amazed by how her academic standing had improved once she had proper time and resources to practice. "I've just been discussing something with her that might interest you." Whitfield glanced at Katie, then back to Jasmine. "Would you mind if we spoke privately for a moment?" Katie squeezed her arm. "I'll go find us some drinks," she said, disappearing into the crowd. Once they were alone, Whitfield continued. "Over the past months, I've been working with several business associates to establish a foundation focused on musical education for underprivileged students." Jasmine raised an eyebrow, surprised by this information. "Your story?" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. And your talent have been something of a wake-up call for me. I've realized how many potential artists never get the opportunity to develop their gifts because of financial barriers. That's unexpected, Jasmine said honestly. A hint of a smile crossed his face. Yes, well, people can change. The foundation will provide instruments, lessons, and performance opportunities to young musicians who couldn't otherwise afford them. We're looking for someone to help direct the program, someone who understands firsthand the challenges these students face. Jasmine blinked, suddenly understanding where this was going. And you want me to be involved? We'd like to offer you the position of artistic director, he confirmed. You'd work with music educators to identify promising students, arrange for their training, and organize showcases for their work. The salary is competitive, and you'd still have time for your own performances and continued training. Why me? She asked, genuinely curious. There are more established musicians who have far more experience. Because you bring something they don't, authenticity. You've lived the struggle these students face. You understand what it means to balance artistic pursuits with practical necessities. He paused, and frankly, you have a certain determination that I find valuable. Jasmine couldn't help but smile at that. You mean stubbornness? Call it what you will, he replied, a hint of his old confidence returning. The offer stands. Take some time to think about it. There's no rush. As he turned to leave, Jasmine called after him, Mr. Whitfield. He paused, looking back at her. Why did you try to humiliate me that night? He considered the question for a moment. Because I could, he finally said. Because I was used to exercising power over others without consequence. And because I never expected to be proven wrong so thoroughly. He met her gaze directly. I'm grateful that I was. With that, he nodded and walked away, leaving Jasmine to consider his unexpected offer. Later that night, as she and Katie rode home in a taxi, a luxury they decided was warranted for the special occasion, Jasmine looked out at the city lights and thought about how much had changed in 6 short months. So, Katie asked, are you going to take the job? I don't know, Jasmine replied honestly. It's a big responsibility. But think of the impact you could have, Katie pointed out. All those kids with talent but no resources, you could be the person who changes their lives. Just as someone had changed hers, Jasmine thought. Eleanor Vaughn had opened a door, Anton had shaped her talent, and ironically, Harrison Whitfield, the man who had tried to use her love of music against her, had set everything in motion. Maybe some good can come from bad beginnings, she said softly. What? Katie asked, not hearing her clearly. Jasmine smiled. Nothing. Just thinking out loud. She leaned back in the seat, feeling the pleasant exhaustion that follows a successful performance. Whatever I decide about the foundation, I know one thing for sure. What's that? I'm never going back to waiting tables. They both laughed, and as the taxi continued through the night streets toward home, Jasmine felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for the opportunities that had come her way, but for the strength she had found within herself to seize them when they appeared. Sometimes, she reflected, our greatest moments come when someone underestimates us, and sometimes the people who try to tear us down end up lifting us higher than we ever imagined possible.